Okay, everybody, welcome. We are going to go into the cryptodeposit.org, the white paper. So today's video, we're simply going to go to cryptodeposit.org and we're going to have ourselves a little reading of the white paper. All right, so let's do that right now. And let's pull up our website here. So, hopefully everybody can see that all right. Looking good, I hope. All right, so apologies. All right, here we go. Once again, if you, as you see here, if you are at cryptodeposit.org, right, we'll just refresh the screen. Of course, you can see there's deposit cash, there's buy stables, there's deposit stables, there's holdings, there's borrow, over-the-counter OTC statements, messages, activity, exchange, swap. But then, of course, on the bottom of the home page is the white paper. So let's just simply go through the white paper and let's see what you guys think. I would love to get feedback. But here we go. Deposit Protocol White Paper. It was published recently, 30th of March, 2026. A technical and compliance-focused review of CryptoDeposit's fixed-term stablecoin bill architecture, treasury controls, travel rule hooks, accounting model, and reconciliation framework. All right. Open source, right? You can see on the bottom there is the link, cryptodeposit.org/assets, white paper, and you can download as well. Fixed term and fixed rate stablecoin deposits, contract level compliance and travel rule controls, and then independent accounting, event replay, and reconciliation. So here we go. Version 1.0. Notice this paper is based on a review of the CryptoDeposit code base and selected public sources available as of the 30th of March 2026. It is intentionally precise about what it is implemented today, what is configurable but not yet activated, and what remains on the roadmap. Security compliance and institutional readers are better served by explicit control boundaries than by broad or aspirational claims. The strongest fair description of the current system is Crypto Deposit is a compliance-architected, KYC-ready, fixed-term stablecoin deposit protocol with explicit contract-level travel rule hooks, double entry accounting, and replayable reconciliation. It should not be described as a fully deployed end-to-end FATF complete platform because full customer KYC, KYB onboarding, and the broader compliance operations stack are still to come. Point of clarification here, there is KYC available on cryptodeposit.org as of the time of this recording, which is roughly the 28th of May 2026. So we're just going back in time just a little bit for this white paper. So, accessible summary. Most on-chain stablecoin yield products optimize for composability and access, but not for the things institutions, auditors, and regulators care about most. Fixed obligations, all right, known maturity dates, explicit balance sheet treatment, policy-aware issuance and payouts, auditability, replayable books and records. Okay, so Crypto Deposit takes a different approach. Instead of treating yield as a floating claim on a pool, it issues a dated bill with a defined maturity and redemption value. Instead of relying only on wallet user experience and event logs, it maintains a general ledger and a separate event indexer so balances can be independently reconstructed. Instead of pretending compliance can be bolted on later, it already contains a compliance registry, a travel rule registry, server-side identity binding for wallet actions, and an operational model designed for controlled issuance. In practical terms, users get a fixed-term, fixed-rate stablecoin deposit instrument, Operators get explicit liabilities, maturity buckets, and reserve controls. Auditors get journal entries, event replay, and on-chain reconciliation. Regulators get a system designed for supervision, control, and auditability. That combination is the core proposition. Executive summary. Crypto Deposit is a server-relayed smart contract native stablecoin deposit system that issues tokenized bills representing fixed-term, fixed-rate obligations. The architecture combines on-chain issuance and redemption logic, a treasury contract that records claims, liabilities, reserve ratios, and maturity buckets, a compliance registry and a travel rule registry, an authenticated server control plane, HSM/KMS capable signing, a double entry accounting engine, a replayable event indexer, a reconciliation layer that compares ledger state, indexed event state, and live on-chain state. This is a materially different design from anonymous or purely pool-based yield protocols. It is also different from many permission tokenized yield products that focus on off-chain legal wrappers and wallet whitelisting, but do not publicly document contract-level travel rule enforcement as part of the asset lifecycle. The result is a system that is easier to explain to risk committees, easier to assess in supervised environments, and easier to reconcile than conventional DeFi yield products. The central claim is not merely that the protocol adds compliance language to a yield product. It is that the controlled logic is embedded into issuance, payout, accounting, and operations. The problem Crypto Deposit solves. Number one, stablecoin holders want certainty, not only liquidity. Many on-chain yield products are open term and variable rate. That is useful for some users, but it is not ideal for treasury users, structured cash management, or users who want a known maturity date, a known promise redemption value, a clear distinction between principal and yield. Crypto Deposit addresses that by issuing a dated bill rather than a floating vault share. Institutions need explicit liabilities. A core weakness in much crypto yield infrastructure is that liabilities are implicit. Assets may be observable on-chain, but the platform's obligations are not modeled in a way that resembles treasury banking or institutional accounting. Crypto Deposit explicitly records deposit claims, total deposit liabilities, maturity bucketed liabilities, reserve ratios, protocol revenue, strategy deployment. This makes treasury management and reconciliation legible. Regulated markets require accountable intermediaries and traceable controls. Regulatory oversight is grounded in identifiable control points such as accountable operators, policy enforcement, audit trails, books and records, screening controls, identity and traceability workflows. Crypto Deposit is built around an operator-gated issuance model, contract registries, authenticated wallet actions, persistent event logs, and a formal accounting layer. Number 4, existing travel rule implementations are usually off-chain overlays. In practice, travel rule implementation in digital assets is commonly handled via VASP to VASP messaging networks and interoperability layers rather than in the application contract itself. That is the industry norm, and it is understandable. The travel rule is fundamentally about transmitting and verifying originator and beneficiary information, which cannot be reduced to raw on-chain state alone. Crypto Deposit's contribution is not that it eliminates off-chain compliance work. It does not. Its contribution is that it gives the asset lifecycle an explicit contract level enforcement point rather than leaving travel rule as a purely procedural or external checklist item. 5. Auditability in crypto is often overstated. It's on-chain is not the same thing as it reconciles. Crypto Deposit separates and compares three views of truth: the live contract state, the replayed event state, the internal double entry ledger. That is substantially closer to how institutional finance expects control evidence to work. System overview. At a high level, the current deposit system works as follows. 1. A user connects a wallet and requests a deposit from the front end. 2. The server authenticates the wallet via signed message and JWT. 3. The server validates term, rate, token chain, and exposure limits. 4. A controlled operator signer submits the on-chain issue. Transaction. The bill contract pulls stablecoins from the depositor and records the deposit in Treasury. The contract mints an ERC 721 bill and deploys a per bill ERC 5095 token. The server posts a matching journal entry. The event indexer independently replays and reconstructs the economic state from on-chain events. 9. Reconciliation compares the ledger indexer and live chain state. So architecture. Let's go down here. Architecture. Customer wallet. Front end. Authenticated deposit API. Request validation, rate checks, exposure limits, idempotency, and then controlled signer, environment key, ledger, or AWS KMS. Then, discount bill contract, compliance, registry, travel rule, registry, treasury, and then bill token factory. And then finally, on-chain events, we've got the event indexer, event store, and then deposit accounting engine. So general ledger and reconciliation, product mechanics, deposit instrument. The core instrument is a tokenized bill. The primary ownership record is an ERC 721 bill NFT. Each bill also has a dedicated ERC 5095 style fungible token deployed for it. The bill records issuance, maturity, principal, redemption value, commission terms, depositor, payout wallet, and introducing wallet. This structure matters because it separates ownership and transferability semantics, payout destination, fixed value maturity economics, treasury behavior. The treasury contract is not a passive wallet. It is an accounting-aware state machine for deposit claims, deposit liabilities, maturity buckets, reserve floors, strategy deployment, protocol revenue. When a deposit is recorded, the Treasury increases both the principal claim and the full liability due at maturity and allocates that liability into a maturity bucket. That is closer to asset liability management than to conventional DeFi pool accounting. Accounting behavior. At issuance, the internal ledger posts two economic legs. Principal received, treasury asset versus deposit liability. Promised interest, interest expense versus interest payable. This is a critical design choice. It means the internal books recognize not just the cash received, but the full promised liability. That is why ledger totals can reconcile to on-chain liability totals rather than only to principal. Compliance architecture, compliance registry. The code base contains a dedicated compliance registry upgradable contract with role-based administration and explicit block status controls. At the contract layer, this provides a simple but important primitive. Compliant or allowed addresses can proceed. Blocked addresses cannot. This is intentionally narrower than a full KYC platform. It is an enforcement hook, not a complete onboarding system. Travel Rule Registry. The codebase contains a Travel Rule Registry upgradable contract with per token policies, configurable threshold, optional always on mode, TTL expiry, hashed payer, payee, and customer reference fields. One-shot style status management, ready, consumed, canceled, expired. This is significant for two reasons. First, it keeps raw identifying payloads off-chain. The contract stores hashes and status, not plain text PII. Second, it makes travel rule an execution precondition for configured flows rather than a separate memorandum that lives outside the system. Where the control applies today. In the reviewed codebase, compliance and travel rule checks are applied to bill issuance eligibility, redemption payouts, early redemption payouts, introducing wallet commission payouts. Payout wallet updates are screened through the compliance registry. That is materially stronger than a model in which compliance is deferred entirely to off-platform procedures after economic state has already changed. For precision, the strongest current pattern is on payout flows. Redemption and commission transfers both enforce the policy check and then consume the travel rule record. The issuance path already checks is compliant, but if one-time pre-clear semantics are required for issuance as well, consuming the record on the issuance path is the natural next hardening step. What this does not mean. This does not mean the system has already solved all FATF obligations. FATF-aligned operation still requires off-chain capabilities such as customer identity collection, KYC and KYB, sanctions screening workflows, originator and beneficiary data handling, VASP counterparty exchange where required, monitoring, escalation, retention, and reporting. Those operational components are broader than a single contract and should be treated as such. Current implementation status. The honest current status is the protocol has real compliance and travel rule rails. The end-to-end KYC, KYB onboarding layer is not yet live. Email and phone verification primitives exist server-side. The architecture is ready to integrate a full onboarding and case management layer. That is best described as KYC ready and FATF aligned in architecture, not fully complete in production operations. Security and operational controls. Controlled issuance. The deposit product is not a fully anonymous self-service contract call in production mode. The server control plane validates requests and uses an operator signer to submit the on-chain issuance transaction. That model gives the operator several control points: wallet authentication, chain and parameter validation, exposure limit checks, rate validation against the published yield curve, refusal to proceed when accounting is unavailable, refusal to proceed when no signer is configured in staging or production. For regulated deployment, this is an intentional design choice. It creates accountable control points around issuance. Wallet-bound authentication. The server binds requests to a wallet identity by verifying an EIP 191 signature. Checking a time stamp window. issuing a wallet JWT with role information. This is a practical way to connect wallet control to server-side policy enforcement. Idempotency and rate limits. The deposit route uses IP rate limiting, wallet-aware request context, idempotency keys backed by persistent storage. These are foundational production controls for financial workflows. HSM/KMS capable signing. The code base includes an AWS KMS signer for SECP 256K1 keys and explicitly verifies that the KMS key is appropriate for Ethereum signing. In production mode, the intended posture is the signing key lives in AWS KMS hardware. The private key does not leave KMS. Signing actions are auditable via AWS infrastructure. This is materially stronger than keeping a hotkey in an application process. Environment separation. The runtime and build model intentionally separates local development, staging, production. Production and staging require real JWT secrets, post-GRE SQL, real contract registries, real signer configuration. That separation matters because many crypto systems inadvertently blur demo and production control boundaries. This codebase is explicit about them. Accounting, replay, and reconciliation. Why this matters. Most crypto systems treat accounting as a downstream reporting exercise. Crypto deposit treats accounting as a core part of the deposit lifecycle. The ledger model. The ledger does not simply note that a deposit happened, it records the economic substance. Treasury asset increase, principal liability, promised interest payable, interest expense recognition. That makes the platform's obligations explicit. Replayable event indexing. A separate event indexer pulls chain state, filter logs by configured contract, addresses, decodes known topics, and reconstructs running balances by token. The event indexer is persisted independently from the journal. That independence matters. It means the protocol can compare what the contract says, what the contracts say, what a replay of the event history says, what the journal says. Reconciliation model. The reconciliation engine explicitly includes both principal deposit liabilities, promised interest payable, when comparing the ledger to on-chain deposit liabilities. That is the correct treatment for a fixed-termed, fixed-rate product. If the internal books only tracked principal, the protocol would understate its obligation. Why this is institution grade. An institutional reviewer should care that the system is designed so that the contract can be replayed, the journal can be rebuilt, mismatches can be surfaced, liabilities are not hidden in narrative notes. That is not common in smart contract yield systems. Why this is a strong proposition. For users, fixed termed, fixed rate, dated maturity, tokenized proof of the claim, on-chain ownership record. For operators, explicit liabilities, reserve ratio controls, maturity buckets, auditable issuance, persistent event history, independent replay. For auditors and risk committees, double entry books, chain to ledger reconciliation, deterministic deposit terms, Role-based administration, HSM-ready signing model. For regulators and supervisors, regulators and supervisors generally focus on whether a system is legible, controllable, and auditable. Crypto deposit is stronger than anonymous yield protocols on those dimensions because it is built around accountable operator roles, explicit screening hooks, policy-driven travel rule controls, pause and upgrade governance, books and records, persistent logs, a deployment model that anticipates supervision. That is the relevant frame for regulatory alignment, not rhetorical approval, but control system legibility. Market positioning and fact check. What can be said confidently? Crypto deposit occupies an unusual position at the intersection of fixed-term, fixed-rate stablecoin deposits, tokenized on-chain bills, contract-level compliance and travel rule hooks, double-entry reconciliation against live chain state. What should not be claimed? The stronger statement that crypto deposit is the only smart contract offering in the world with this feature set cannot be responsibly proven from public materials alone. That type of universal negative claim is not appropriate for an institutional paper unless it can be substantiated to a much higher evidentiary standard. What can be claimed fairly? As of March 30th, 2026, based on reviewed public materials from FATF, TRISA, SumSub, OpenTrade, OpenEden, and Ondo, we did not identify another publicly documented smart contract native product that combines all of the following in one disclosed architecture: fixed-term, fixed-rate stablecoin deposit economics, explicit contract-level travel rule gating primitives, double-entry accounting tied to issuance, replayable three-way reconciliation between chain events and ledger. That is a qualified market observation, not a universal legal assertion. Why the qualification matters. Adjacent products clearly exist. OpenTrade publicly documents fixed rate and variable rate products, including fixed term and open term products built around ERC 4626 vault mechanics. OpenTrade also documents whitelisted wallet operational flows. Ondo publicly documents tokenized treasury products with ongoing or periodically updated yield characteristics rather than the dated bill structured used here. OpenEden documents permissioned tokenized treasury and stablecoin workflows with strong transparency and controls. Travel rule vendors such as TRISA and SumSub document interoperability and messaging networks used by VASPs for data exchange. Those are all relevant comparables. What remains unusual in crypto deposit is the attempt to combine dated bill economics, explicit liabilities, and contract visible compliance control points in a single operating model. Current state versus roadmap. This distinction is essential. Implemented in the reviewed codebase. Fixed term bill issuance. Fixed redemption value calculation. ERC 721 bill ownership. Per bill ERC 5095 token deployment. Treasury liability tracking. Reserve ratio configuration. Maturity bucket tracking. Compliance registry. Travel rule registry. Authenticated server relay. KMS capable signer. Double entry journal posting. Replayable event indexing. Reconciliation engine. Email and phone verification primitives. Configured but not yet the full operating model. end-to-end KYC onboarding, end-to-end KYB onboarding, live sanctions and case management integrations, full travel rule counterparty exchange workflows, institutional notification and messaging stack, important current production implications. The current mainnet configuration sets travel rule threshold to 1 million USD equivalent and deposit cap to 50,000 USD equivalent for the reviewed Ethereum deployment configuration. This means normal deposit issuance is structurally below the currently configured travel rule threshold unless policy is changed. The codebase therefore demonstrates real travel rule machinery, but not yet a production posture where ordinary deposits are forced through a live KYC and travel rule workflow. This does not weaken the architecture, it clarifies the rollout stage. Why regulators may view this more favorably than conventional DeFi. The appropriate framing is not that regulators or supervisors would endorse a product in the abstract. The appropriate framing is that the architecture aligns more closely with the kinds of control evidence regulators and compliance teams usually require. Defined obligations. The product creates dated liabilities rather than vague participation in a pool. Accountable operator. Issuance is not purely anonymous and uncontrolled. There is an accountable operator path with authentication, validation, and auditable submission. Screening hooks. Compliance and travel rule are not treated as ancillary controls. They exist as first-class control surfaces in the architecture. Books and records. The system maintains a journal and can reconcile that journal against chain state. Operational governance. The contracts are role-governed, pausable, and upgradable under explicit administrative roles. That is often more realistic for regulated deployment than pretending immutable anonymous governance is always preferable. Separation of concerns. Sensitive identifying information can remain off-chain while the chain enforces that required policy conditions were met. Limitations and non-claims. An institution-grade paper should say these things plainly. 1. KYC KYB is still to come. The codebase is ready for KYC KYB integration, but it is not accurate to present KYC onboarding as fully deployed today. So as of 2 months later now, this has been updated. May of 2026 versus March of 2026. Okay, number 2, FATF compliance is broader than a contract. FATF aligned operation requires organizational, legal, operational controls beyond what any smart contract can provide on its own. 3. Travel rule is partly off-chain by nature. The contract can enforce policy checks and hashed pre-clear records, but the actual transmission, retention, and governance of originator and beneficiary information still requires off-chain infrastructure and operating procedures. 4. Travel rule activation is policy dependent. A travel rule registry that is configured above normal ticket sizes is a dormant control, not an actively triggered one. Transferred semantics can be tightened further. The reviewed codebase emits bill transfer events and separately tracks payout wallet updates. If the target deployment requires full permissioned secondary transferability, transfer time screening restrictions should be strengthened accordingly. Current production scope is intentionally narrow. The present reviewed production target is a limited stablecoin set and a narrow chain scope that is usually the correct way to launch regulated financial infrastructure. Conclusion: Crypto Deposit is compelling because it does not ask the market to choose between crypto native settlement and institution grade control. Its central thesis is simple. Fixed term, fixed rate stablecoin deposits should be explicit liabilities. those liabilities should be tokenized. Issuance and payout should be policy aware. Books and records should reconcile to the chain. Key management should survive institutional scrutiny. That is a stronger proposition than most crypto yield products offer today. The most credible message to technical security and compliance minded readers is not that the system is fully mature in every operational respect. It is that the system already contains several of the hard architectural components that many protocols avoid: formal liabilities, role-based control, on-chain enforcement hooks, auditable signing, replayable state, independent reconciliation. The remaining work, most notably full KYC KYB onboarding and production activation of the compliance perimeter, is important but substantially de-risked because the architecture was designed for it from the beginning. That is why the system supports serious institutional consideration. And then you can see down here selected implementation references: smart contracts, Solidity, server and control plane, and then of course accounting and reconciliation. We also have a few external references such as FATF and travel rule, industry travel rule infrastructure, comparable or adjacent tokenized yield products such as you see here, these few. So there was a few comparisons. And with that being said, we have now gone through the white paper, which was published, as you can see here, back on the 30th of March. Now that we are live with the YouTube channel, now that we are live with some of the things we've launched most recently, after the white paper was published, of course, these last few weeks, I thought it was a good time to go through the white paper, put the video on the channel, and for anybody who wishes to share and give their peers or let them know that they have an easy to consume bit of material here that we've read through to really drive home the point of just how unique and just how comprehensive this tech stack is, okay? And with that being said, I think we will go ahead and call it a day. I think we will finish our recording, and that's about that. Thank you, everybody, and wishing you a very good day.